Welcome to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier, and I am your host. I'm coming to you from my home via Zoom. Today's show is in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. In June of 1968, Congressman George E. Brown from California was the first to introduce the concept of recognizing the contributions of Hispanics in the United States. And Hispanic Heritage Month today runs from September 15th until October 15th. It's important to note that during the civil rights movements, the push to recognize the person's culture or origin, regardless of race, gained traction due to the growing awareness of diversity. We have three guests today to discuss the importance of the Latino community, how we address ourselves, what do we call ourselves, voting, and the current affairs facing our community, and to give their perspective. My first guest is Nestor Alvarez from the Community Affairs Manager for Telemundo 44. My next guest is Daniel Jones, Partnership Specialist for Maryland for the 2020 Census. And my third guest is Perla Guerrero, PhD and Director of U.S. Latino Studies. So let's start with you, Nestor. I wanted to ask you, you're with Telemundo, so I imagine you see such a cross-section of what is going on and what our community is facing. And being a presidential election year, that's a lot of stuff going on. What are the primary concerns you see facing the Latino community?
Absolutely. Everything, right? So it's pandemic and everything else also on top of it now with elections. So one of the things that we're doing in our commitment, which has always been, is to inform, right? Right. Stay safe with the pandemic and stay informed. And as we go into the election cycle now, it's, there's so much information out there or misinformation out there. So and I think it speaks to not just the Latino community, but all communities also, and especially the immigrant communities, where are you getting your source of information, and having that now it's more relevant than ever. And we were talking about the Latino and our culture and having plans and all of that, right, before getting into this conversation. But that is so critical now, right? We need to vote by mail. What is that going to mean for us? This is the first time for many people doing it. So what does that mean? So all this new world that we're getting into, so it just adds more and layer to the community, right, in the Latino community and all the issues that we're facing. So the importance of having that, and Telemundo, very proud that NBC, Telemundo, it has the Prepara tu voto, and just get your vote ready, plan your vote, planificando tu voto. So it's important.
And what I find interesting is that there is an assumption that Latinos, Hispanics, and we'll get to terms in a minute with Professor Guerrero, but
Latinx, who knows?
Latinx, yeah. But the question really remains, that there are many Republican Hispanics, and there are Democrats, and there are independent. So there is not a real fix as to how the community is going to vote. And so I was going to ask you, Perla, being that you study, the community and the United States and our labels, mm-hmm. What do you think how is this going to affect our community, our different points of view?
Yeah, this is a really great question. So I guess very quickly, right, since we brought up labels already. So the follow-up to your great introduction is that so Hispanic is something that the U.S. Census Bureau came up with in the mid-20th century to group people who previously were called Spanish surname, Mexican, any kind of amalgamation of labels under the new label Hispanic. And under the label Hispanic, they include people from Spain and exclude people from Brazil. There was a push against that term because Hispanic, A, was government imposed, but B, again, through those exclusions and inclusions made an odd combination, right? Because as people in this hemisphere, we have more in common with folks from Brazil than we do from Spaniards in Europe. And so there was a push to have Latino as something that comes more from the community. But of course, then there was a critique of Latinos, since Spanish is a gendered language that, oh, it's supposed to be universal, but really it's always male. And so there was a push for Latina, Latino for inclusion. And this is where we get to Latinx, the current moment. So Latinx is something that has come from the community, from young people in particular, from progressive people who know that because Spanish is gendered language with A and O, female and male, that a way to create inclusion for queer people, for gender nonconforming people, and gender non-binary people is the X. Now, the X is something that is squarely an English kind of iteration. In other parts of the world, like Latin America, the gender neutral term they're using is Latine. So the E instead of the X. Les invito, hola amigues, instead of hola amigos for mixed kind of company, right? So these are just kind of growing pains. Everyone doesn't agree with the terminology, but I think we have to listen to why certain people proposed it. And now to kind of get back to your original question, right? We tend to discuss Latinx people as if they are homogenous, but we're not, right? We are an ethnicity. We are white, we are Black, we are indigenous, we are mixed race, we are Asian. And that diversity also means we have very different kind of politics. We're staunchly conservative sometimes, we're staunchly liberal at times, we're staunchly anti-immigrant at times, and also quite progressive at times. So we're not a homogenous group. And as a teacher, I feel the need to say, if you want to read a little bit more about Hispanic Republicans specifically, there's a book out by a scholar named Jerry Cadava that by the very title, Hispanic Republicans, and why they exist, when the assumption is that Latinx people are always Democrats and progressive.
So someone who's gotten a chance to see our diversity firsthand with the census, Daniel, welcome for being on the show. You know, what has been the response with regard to, now that you're at the tail end of the census, from the Latino community?
Woo, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be on your show. By the way, you talked about earlier about like Democrats, Republicans, and independent. The beautiful thing about the census is that we want to count everyone. So if you're a Republican, we want to count you. And if you're a Democrat, we want to count you. If you're an independent or whatever you call yourself, guess what? The beauty of the census is that we count everyone, right? And I got to tell you, the Hispanic community right now, the population estimate, about 60 million Hispanic Latinos in the beautiful US of A. And what we do with the Census Bureau, right? We take really a picture of the population. If you want to know your community, what the Latino community looks like, where Latinos are in the United States, you come to the Census Bureau. We'll talk about this later, maybe, but one thing that I want to encourage the Hispanic Latino community is to begin using the Census Bureau to collect data and find information about his own community. It doesn't matter if you're a business owner, if you are a church, right, or just a person who wants to just know more about the Latino community. We have all that data. And guess what?
Well, and that's important data because you can use it for business, for marketing. You can use it if you're trying to do community activism to figure out where you need to approach.
It will make your job so much easier. And guess what? We do not charge you for it. It is free. Other people will package it and sell it to you. We actually show you how to come use the data. We show you how to use it, how to get it. And so you can benefit and help your community. But let me go back to your beautiful question. How do you? Now, let me say this to you. You know, I hear a lot, you know, and in some cases, this might be true, right? People talk about a lot about the Hispanic community being scared or being afraid or hiding. I got to tell you, I've seen a community who once you explain to them the importance of the census and you explain to them that their data is confidential. By the way, everyone cares about their data, making sure it's confidential, not just immigrants, right? But they have shown a willingness to provide the information. And I'm not just saying this to say it, I am on the ground. I am at the churches, I am at the community events, working with our population, especially those that we call hard to count populations, and their willingness to be counted is incredible. Their desire to be counted is incredible. But again, in most cases, the challenges that we find is not so much that they are afraid, but the fact that they do not know much about the census, and they wonder, what is this? Why do you want this information? Once we explain to them what it is, they're delighted to participate. So I gotta tell you, we're delighted with the numbers. Nationally, we're doing great. In this area, we're doing great. And we are just looking forward to, we continue to push and push to ensure that everyone is counted. One of the things that we did, again, from the beginning, the Census Bureau talked about how to count populations. And I gotta tell you, those households that have not responded, we have been sending them emails. We have actually made phone calls, right? And we actually sent another letter, 7th letter, to remind them to please complete the census form. These are things that we did not do before, right? We never called people and told them, hey, is this the census, complete your census form? We did not email household before, but now we're doing that because we want to ensure that we count our Hispanic Latino community. And we have NQAs, we have mobile questionnaire assistance centers in those hard to count areas of population. And we made it so easy. I mean, this time around,
congratulations. I'm really glad to hear that.
It was not all my work. It was not all my work, by the way, but thank you.
Well, I congratulate everyone that was involved because it was a massive effort. I can imagine. But this show, when our audience sees it, because we're recording it, they can see the diversity of what it means to be Latinx, Latina, just by looking at us, right? But the importance of participation in this election is crucial because it is such a divided country at the moment. And so, Nestor, I wanted to ask you, what are things that the community should consider and know about not only, the Hispanic community, but why the importance of Hispanic Heritage Month?
Absolutely. I think it goes, and it's tied, right? So everything that we have been doing and at the moment has been around civic engagement. So it's that, we talk about civic engagement, what does that mean, to Daniel's point, right? So it's everything, and it starts right now, right, with the census and being counted. So our commitment has been to participate, get involved, and just bringing it down to the level of like the tiny details, or at the school level, ask, I don't have a computer, how do I have access for X and Y? I mean, it all starts, we do it every day, but we just have to explain it. Again, it's about how do we explain it, and we bring it down, bring it to our community. So that has been our commitment. And again, the approach has been around civic engagement, so census, and now we're moving into elections and voter registration. So we have been doing phone banks, we have been doing, everything else in between, this kind of dialogues now, digital forums, that it's all just to bring to our community to stay informed. Again, you need to do your homework. You need to find out, what does this mean? What does this issue mean to me? How is it going to impact, right? We're seeing it now with COVID, right? And disproportionately affecting our Latino community. Well, why? And so you need to start doing your homework and folks getting involved. And we're happy to provide that platform and bringing those issues to the community so they can make the decision and say, hey, I only have 2 weeks to register to vote, and voting by mail, and all of this and all of that. So that is our commitment and what we have been doing for the past, where are we now? It's September, October almost. So it's absolutely important work.
And Perla, what is your, do you have a comment with regard to?
I do.
Okay.
I just wanted to add something about Hispanic Heritage Month, right? It's interesting we keep calling it Hispanic Heritage Month, even though we have moved past that largely to at least Latino. But the importance, at least on a college campus as I see it, right, of Hispanic Heritage Month is that this is an opportunity to really showcase the diversity of our Latinx communities, right? I think the beauty is that we can identify under this larger label, right? And we all kind of here on the show can, bond over parts of that. But as you said, our experiences can be quite different, right? Along race, along gender, around sexual orientation. which means our experiences in the United States, even the way we engage the census or not engage it, is also quite different or along these different lines. And so on a college campus, it's really important because this is where we as Latinas, Latinos also learn about other communities. We learn about other struggles that are different from our own that we might not have learned about in any other place. So, you know, as an educator, Hispanic Heritage Month is really important, as are the other months, Asian American Pacific Islander Month, LGBTQ history. All of that stuff is really important because we learn from each other.
You know, one of the things that I noticed, though, that's a little bit different for us, and let's rename it the Latino Heritage Month, Latina Heritage, is that you don't hear too many stories about leaders and persons who have had a great impact in the United States, other than maybe something that happened 200 years ago. And there's so many examples and stories of some really great people. And I can't figure out, why is it that it's not really being shared in the mainstream?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, again, because we are of different races, right? If there's an Afro-Latino who accomplishes something, then he's racialized as Black, right? And so he is upheld, right, in the Black community as someone that's made a great contribution. And their Latinidad sometimes is purposefully erased, right? Not necessarily by them, but by society at large. And you see a lot of examples of this, right? Like I'm thinking of the Schomburg Center in New York is very well known as an African-American history center, but he was also Latino, right? And so unless you know very specifically that history, then you just kind of forgo it, right? I think a lot of the media, right, in terms of representation of Latinidad, there are a lot of really great Latinx actors, but because they're Black, they are not identified as being Latinx. And again, this isn't something they deny. This is something that we also help to kind of push to the margins. And then there are, of course, the instances where maybe the accomplishments of that we have, you know, in many other fields are just overlooked because it's a little difficult to tell a story where we're not squarely Black, white, or Asian. We're mixed. We're kind of like un poquito de todo, and then people are just
a little bit
like,
of everything, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
They're like,
well, you know, it's interesting because I remember when I was growing up, I came from Argentina, and I went over to a friend's house, and the mother made tacos. Mm-hmm. And I was like, ooh, tacos, because I had never had them before, because in Argentina, we don't eat tacos. Right. And so she asked me if she had done it right. And I was like, I don't know, you know, I don't think so. And so, you know, and then you have, you know, the white Americans who celebrate Cinco de Mayo, and they think we all do. And
right.
And it's not a holiday for all of us, although all of us like a margarita.
On Cinco de Mayo, right. And they think it's Mexican Independence Day, and it's not. Right. Yeah, there's a lot more work to be done about educating the general public about the specificity of our history.
You raised a good point about media. So Nestor,
yeah, no,
the media guy.
You know, to this point, and it's the importance of being at the table and sitting or in the room, as they say, right? But and making that change, and we know it's not gonna, you know, be overnight, but you know, constantly being there and being in that table, and hey, you know, today is an important day for the Latino community, and this happened, or the Latinx community, and so it's important for us to be there and be represented so we can tell our story. And then that's part of what I always say, that, you know, people are like, oh wow, you're now at Telemundo, why did you make this switch and everything? But I'm like, we have to tell our story, and it's me telling this story. I don't want you to tell my story. It's kind of, we were community organizing, right? You want folks to speak for themselves and have that power to speak to power and everything. But it's you have your voice and you tell your story. And so that's extremely important. And look, we're extremely proud people, right? When I was learning about the show, I'm like, oh, I'm going to wear my guayabera, although you can't see it much, right? And perla. But I was like, let me wear, it's not from El Salvador, I'm Salvadorian, but it's from Nicaragua, which is right next door. So, again, it's like the beauty of it and celebrating. And I always say, we just don't celebrate for Hispanic Heritage Month. It's all year round. So we're Latinos or Latinas or Latinx or Hispanic all year round, right? So we celebrate every day because we whether it's through the food, through the culture, through traditions, and everything else in between. So we're extremely proud people.
One of the last things I wanted to talk about and mention is sometimes the elephant in the room where, so we're very diverse, right? And you mentioned that the African-American community has, their month and they have their things and stuff. And we all get wrapped up together when we're talking about diversity, but there is an issue between the Latino community and the African American community that sometimes we don't advocate for each other and equally or the same, and there's actually conflict between the two groups. But it makes it very confusing because we do have the Afro-Latino who is being divided, I guess, or caught in the middle, or how do you guys see this issue?
Let me just briefly jump in here.
Yeah,
of course.
What I want you guys to know, because these are issues that the Census Bureau obviously look into all the time. People write to the Census Bureau. You have the Hispanic community, all these issues. When you talk about Afro-Latinos, there's the issue of Afro-Latinos wanting to have, in terms of the questionnaire, have a space where they can identify themselves as Afro-Latino, for example, or the LGBT population also wanting that space where they can identify yourself. What is important to know, these are issues that the Census Bureau is very aware and that we deal with on a daily basis. And what we try to do is you look at the questionnaire for the 2020 census and you look at the Hispanic Latino question, right, which is the easy part. When we ask someone, you're Hispanic Latino, and then identify yourself as being Mexican or any other places, what we try to do at the Census Bureau is not to define people, but allow people to define themselves, right? You tell us who you are. If you look at the questionnaire, we ask you first in terms of Hispanic Latino, you can check that, but if none of the options that you have, right, apply to you, we still give you a space at the bottom for you to say, this is who I am, I'm from this country, and that's fine. When we move to the next question after that one, which is the race question, that's when the Hispanic community become very confused, right? This is when the issues it's very difficult for a lot of Latinos to be able to identify this. They don't know what to say. Like we ask you, what is your race? Like, are you white? Are you black? And there are all the choices. Talking to the community is like, I don't know. And what I tell them is, look, there's no wrong answer, right? When it comes to the Census Bureau, whatever answer you give us is the right answer. We try to stay away from the debate in terms of, activism and people identify yourself this way because they help us better if you do this. We stay from that debate. What we've done in that same question is tell people there's a space at the bottom of that question. If you feel like none of those options apply to you, you can go ahead and write in, I soy mestizo, right? And might apply to a lot of Latino, say mestizo, indígena, whatever you want. So it is important as we have this debate and this discussion, if you feel that you're Latinx, right? I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and because we have Hispanic Latino to satisfy everybody, right? Because it's like, oh, we don't like Hispanic, all this is Latino. You have that option there in the questionnaire. Now it's like, well, it's got to be Latinx. This is where we're going with this. So I am sure what's going to happen to the 2030 census. And by the way, there's a process. The question that you see in the questionnaire usually come from the people, right? Always have a purpose. There's a reason why they're there. They meet a requirement that help this nation provide resources to their community. But when you look at the questions, a lot of times it's people like yourselves who say, hey, there is a need. I don't see myself in the questionnaire. We need the Census Bureau to do X, Y, and Z. We have committees who study that. We see what's the need. Do we need that question there and there? So I want you to know that you also have the power to influence what goes on the questionnaire. And by the way, if you want a question like Latinx to be included, time to get to work now because we're already working on the
groups, right? And yellow countries, right? I mean, Salvadorian. Again, I'm Salvadorian, right? So one of that for years the conversation has been having Salvadorian also as a country there instead of the other, right? So
I know we're getting short on time. I just want to quickly address your question, which is an important one, right?
yes.
The division between Black, Brown Americans. So I think generally what we have to understand is that because a lot of times Latino people have, in their aspiration towards assimilation or towards whiteness in the United States, they have generally as a group betrayed social movements that are led by Black people in the United States. And so we have a large responsibility to be better allies to our Black brothers and sisters, many of whom are also Latinx, right? So and then more generally, both groups need to know a little bit about each other's struggles, a little bit more about each other's struggles, so we can understand where we can really come together and be stronger together.
That's awesome. I think
Absolutely.
that was really well said.
Absolutely. I was going to say that. It's like we have to understand each other. We're all people at the end of the day, right? So we're only humans. So and it starts with understanding your struggle and your issues, where you're coming from, and you know what's affecting you, and it's affecting me as well, right? So how do we just come together for that? So Perla, I think you said it perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that something that is forgotten sometimes is the word tolerance, and you hear it more when they're talking about religion and the different religions. But I think tolerance of each other, especially during the pandemic, within your own household. You can't get out, and your family's driving you crazy. But I mean, it's a practice that I think we all should definitely engage in, and hopefully our leaders will too, because that is, part of the struggle I think this country has seen in the last 4 years is that it's been a lot more divided than trying to, breach the divide, right? So I really want to thank all of you for joining me today as my guests on this show. It was fantastic. You guys are so much fun. Nestor, I don't know, sorry about killing your name.
Yeah. Hey,
but I love you. So
thank you so much for having us.
Sure. And I want to thank the audience for watching us and participating in the show. You can see us on our local channel 21, and you can also see us on YouTube. Our channel is known as Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow Show. You got to add the show at the end to find it. So I'd like to thank everybody for this show. And if you check us out on the YouTube or Facebook, whatever, please share, like, tag, all that social media good stuff. I'm Mariana Cordier. Thank you and good night.